This is the Montreal Jewish Magazine, heard every Tuesday afternoon at 4 on Radio Shalom, on the web, www.radio-shalom.ca. Heard on Thursday mornings at 11:30 on CKUT 90.3 FM, Radio McGill, and frequently on Saturday mornings on Radio Centreville 102.3 FM at 11:30. And on all of those stations, at various times, we'll be speaking about the very fine exhibit of the work of Norman Leibovich. And we have two people connected with the show here. I'm going to ask them to lean in and introduce themselves.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Charles Leibovich, and I'm the son of the late Norman Leibovich.
And to your left?
And I'm Malka Sussman. I was contacted by Charles to help him along with the project, and
so you're familiar with the work?
Yes. Yes, I am. I've been working with him for the past 8 months.
Oh, great.
Getting the works together and whatnot. Mm-hmm.
Now, I saw the show when it opened. We're recording this a week after it opened, approximately, and was very much moved by it. How did the connection between this show and the Outremont Art Gallery come about? Were you residents of Outremont, or was he?
That's correct. My parents, basically, and myself and my siblings moved to Outremont in 1962, and my father lived there for the rest of his life, 40 years. My father passed away in 2002, so we're very much part of Outremont. It's very much our history and our present.
And the gallery, before we go any further, we should even make it clear that people know that the show is going on until the 3rd of September, for those people who are listening to us for the first time.
Yes, may I just say that it's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 1 to 6, and then Fridays it's 1 to 5.
Not on the weekends.
Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, it's closed. Okay.
So the chances to see it are... Well, you've got to get down there and take a look pretty soon if you're seeing it the first time. But we'll talk later about the fact that there's going to be another show. The Galerie d'Art d'Outremont is at 41 Saint-Just Avenue. I had trouble finding it, but then I realized it's just off Outremont Avenue.
That's right. It's just 2 blocks south of the intersection of Wiseman and Bernard.
There's a library in the same building.
It's adjoined to the Robert Bourassa Library, Bibliothèque Robert Bourassa.
Now, I'm looking at the invitation I got, and one of the paintings, the one that really struck me, is there, and it's very clearly displayed. It's a little hard to describe it because I always find it difficult to talk about art on radio, but we're going to try. This is a street scene with some people doing a number of different things in buildings and on the street, and I'm trying to figure out where this is set, or is there a specific setting for it?
Well, my father did speak about this actual painting. I was fortunate enough to have arranged for my father to be videotaped on High Montreal.
Yes, and you're playing the videotape.
And the videotape happens to be playing. He talks about this particular painting, which takes place in the Plateau area.
Because I was looking at it and I was trying to guess. First I said, well, there seem to be hills. Maybe it's Quebec City. But then I figured, no, he was really identified with Montreal, wasn't he?
That's correct.
So it's in the Plateau.
Yeah.
And the streets, are typical Montreal streets. The buildings have that Quebecois style of architecture.
Yes.
So now I can see, and I can see buildings in the back that would... It doesn't necessarily mean it's a specific street. It has a general feel about it.
That's correct.
Now, we'll talk about this over the next little while, and I'll refer to him as Norman so that each of you can talk without saying who he is each time.
Sure.
Norman was born when?
He was born in 1913 in Montreal, September 20th.
And at what point in his life did he decide that this would be his life's work?
Apparently, while he was in high school, he was a very capable student, but he decided that he wanted to focus only on art classes, and he switched to art studies at about the age of 17, 18.
May I ask if this was Baron Byng High School?
That's correct. Went to Baron Byng.
Me too.
Okay.
A little bit later.
Okay.
And he may have even been influenced by some art teachers in Baron Byng. There were some fine ones there.
That's right.
At one time, I think Sherman taught art there, and Savage and several others.
Okay.
I'm not sure if they had been his teachers. So he and was art his métier, his main life right throughout?
It was his métier, raison d'être. He basically identifies himself firstly as an artist,
Mhm.
and that it's the most important thing for him.
I know if I were to have told my family that I wanted to be an artist, they would have probably answered in Yiddish. I'm not sure if you'll understand me, but I'll try. Von dus macht man ein Leben.
Right.
So was he able to make a living from his art?
Yes, he did make a living from his art. Of course, we're talking over a period of 70 years.
Mhm.
So a lot of things had happened as well while he was painting during that period of time. He met my late mother, Pearl Leibovich, and she also herself was an artist before going into her field of social work. And they were married in 1941, and my father continued to paint during that time.
Oh, did he have a studio at home, or did he go out? Nowadays, people have some other place for a studio.
The majority of his artistic life, he had studios outside the home.
Outside the home. Mm-hmm.
In various
loft type places.
Studios above factories or in industrial buildings like the one on Park and Bernard, tall building. Then he was in he shared our space with I think it's the socialist group that we used to meet on Cotenage and Van Horn. There was a small building there.
Oh, the Morris Finchevsky School.
So actually, in a way, the choice of his studios were somewhat historical as well.
Yeah.
And then he was
he political?
No, I couldn't say he was political. No.
Because that was a place that was political.
Yes. No, he was just sharing a space.
He was just sharing the space.
Yes.
Malka, how did you get involved in this project?
Well, I got involved. Charles had contacted a museum here in Montreal inquiring if they knew of anyone who could help him with cataloging and documenting the collection, because now he does have over 1,000 paintings that were left to him by his father, more like 1,200, all in a small confined space. If you could imagine all the paintings no order to them or anything. And so they had referred him to myself, and we met. I went and I saw the paintings.
You work in this field?
Yes, I do. I work on contract in the museum field, in collections management, on the level of documentation. And so this was right in my area, and so I was very excited to come and see the paintings, because many of the paintings, most of them, especially towards the end of his life, no one had even seen them, because he worked at the end of his life. He was he became reclusive. He liked working very privately, and so there's hundreds of paintings that no one had ever seen, and so it was quite exciting to now come in this space and see for the first time many of these paintings, which Charles wanted to now reintroduce and share with everyone else.
Did one of you say 1,000?
Over 1,000, more like 1,200 in a small space. And so it was very important first to start taking inventory of the works. The project had to start on that level. Each painting is given a number. All its essential information is taken. A photograph is taken of each work. Very important to document what is there, and then also to expose. But there's different levels of taking care of artworks. And
so you were also involved in the selection from the 1,000 to the number that are actually on the walls of the gallery.
Yes.
How many are on display?
Just over 70, I believe.
70.
Is that it? Yes.
75.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been a tough choice to pick from 1,000 or 1,200.
Well, yes, it was.
What determined your decision to put a particular painting up?
Well, I think it was a concerted effort with the Galerie d'Art d'Outremont. They came several times.
Also looked at the stuff.
The gentlemen Laurent Bouchard and Robert Poulin visited several times and met with Malka as well and myself. And
so they had a hand in choosing.
So they basically had made pre-selection choices and then eventually chose the 75 that are being
Are
exhibited.
the paintings, we'll get into a little more about his life, which is quite fascinating in a few moments, but are the paintings organized in a specific order, chronological or thematic?
They're not organized chronologically. They're more organized in, he painted various themes, he painted various subjects, and in the exhibition space there's an attempt to associate the different themes, no matter what period of his life he painted it, but that certain themes reoccur maybe 20 years later, and to show these two paintings together, either figuratively, formatively.
Are they dated on the walls?
Some of his paintings are, but some of them aren't.
Unfortunately, we don't have all the information. We gathered through also talking with Charles of what he remembered or what periods he knew. So
Reviews.
obviously, through reviews, there was also lots of detective work involved in
I can
documenting
imagine.
and putting together the exhibition in
You
terms
say
of going back.
reviews. So he had
Oh,
exhibited over the
Oh
years.
yes, yes, he exhibited several times. Part of the detective work was going back to old reviews, reading where he exhibited, updating his resume and his exhibition history. So very much in the 40s and 50s. He exhibited again in the 70s, but then once the 80s came along, he had one retrospective. I believe it was 1980.
That's correct, at Empire Auction.
And after that, he painted by himself and didn't decided not to show his work until he passed away.
Now, your notes that are distributed in the room where the paintings are mentions his connections with some very prominent Canadian artists, so one of whom I knew quite well, Louis Millstock. And in a way, I got the sense that he, like Millstock, also changed from very representational to less so as time went on. Is that a reasonable thing to say?
It certainly is.
Yeah.
I feel more in his abstract work. I don't feel that his work ever becomes totally
No,
abstract.
it never did.
I think that there's always a subject that he retains, making that the focus of his work. But certainly the style in which he painted changed over the years, which also would be natural and how he evolved as well as an artist. So.
Now, how Jewish was his work? I did see several paintings that were clearly Jewish in tone, but was he consistently looking for Jewish themes?
Um, I think the Jewish theme was something that he was conscious of, but it wasn't necessarily the dominating message in his paintings. Because we had organized his paintings in about 6 different areas of theme. There were female nudes, landscapes, narratives, portraits, figuratives, and animals. So I would say the Jewish theme probably
Was one of those.
Well, yes. I mean, I think you could debate it that it's always there, but it was more, I think, obvious in the narratives because he
I
depicted
would
some
think so.
Jewish shtetl life in the narratives and perhaps in some of the figurative paintings.
I mean, I looked at these quite a large number of nudes, and of course, there's nothing specifically Jewish about that. Or is there?
Well, I think that's maybe another topic, but
I guess so. I just thought I'd throw that in. He had to be pretty secular in his feelings and tone to even paint nudes, because I imagine in the Jewish community, had he been very observant, he wouldn't have.
Well, no, my father was not an Orthodox Jewish person. He was, when you use the word secular, I think you mean not religious.
Yeah,
perhaps.
well, maybe that's not the right term.
He was actually quite avant-garde and bohemian in his lifestyle for his times. And again, the art, he identified himself first as an artist. Then perhaps as a Jewish man. It wasn't.
Secondly, all right.
Yeah,
Now, he did have a solid arts training.
that's correct. He went
Maybe we
to.
can talk a bit about that.
Well, I know that. I mean, his training was ongoing. I can identify that he went to the United States for about a year and a half to the in New York to American.
How old was he at the time?
I believe he was in his late 20s at the time.
And was there a possibility he could support himself while studying?
I don't think he was. He basically lived in the moment, and he wasn't concerned about what was going to be for tomorrow. He was very much.
And also, correct me if I'm wrong, I was also understanding that in his time in New York City, when he went to the American Artist School and later on at the Art Student League, he did receive a scholarship so that he would be able to stay there and study and live. Yes.
So his talent was recognized there.
Oh,
quite
definitely,
early.
definitely, yes.
But he always was drawn back to Montreal, and I guess other than the time he He was in New York, and I guess there was a trip to Israel, which we'll talk about later. He remained most of his life in Montreal.
Oh, he's very much attached to Montreal, the culture, and also the Montreal Jewish culture at that time.
He did go to Mexico too, though.
He went to Mexico with my mother in the, I believe, maybe late 40s. And it was, I noted
San Miguel Allende, or not necessarily there? I mean, that was a place where a lot of artists.
Yes, I was going to say that I'd recently viewed another biography of Cosgrove, one of the seven, and he went to Mexico during the same period. So I found that interesting.
I know that if we're talking about the period that your father's work was starting to get quite well recognized here in Montreal and elsewhere, it coincides with some of the names that we have here listed previously: Louis Mielstock, Mo Reinblatt, Sam Bornstein. There's a sort of school of Montreal Jewish artists, and I use the word school very loosely. Some of the people are still around. Recently interviewed Sylvia Ari, who may have been a contemporary of his.
And a friend of my
friend, and Rita Briansky. And there was a definite feel for Montreal Jewish art in the period of the 30s and 40s. Was he active in that group, or was he on his own?
No, I would say he was active in meeting with other contemporaries and part of a community.
The Mexico trip didn't bring a Mexican style to his work as such, did it?
I think that it does show in his landscape paintings of that time in the late 40s. He did paint on site in Mexico, so there are certain landscape paintings which are definitely Mexico scenes. You could even tell by the change of the coloring in his paintings, lots more browns, reds, earth tones. So definitely, yes, there would be an influence. But I think after he returned to Montreal, you don't necessarily see that connection anymore. So.
Now, a trip to Israel, I guess, would have been important in his life. Did it mean anything to him in his art?
Oh, absolutely. I think he certainly had a connection through his family, his parents, his grandparents, about his identity, in terms of the Jewish identity, the experience of being Jewish in Canada, and his parents having been immigrants coming from Eastern Europe. But at the same time identifying the artistic experience as from a Jewish perspective.
I read from a statement that he made about his trip. He says, "My visit to Israel was an inspiration," he puts this in quotation marks, "and it commenced one of the most fruitful periods of my life." What do you think made him decide to write that? Why particularly Israel? Did his style change at all? Or was it just the feeling of being in Israel?
Well, as he mentions on
Anybody want to touch that one?
Yeah. Well, he mentions on the video that he was really treated, he and my mom were treated like royalty by the Israelis.
He was known there for his work?
He became known there. And by the kibbutzim, he was moved by the Israeli people and by the experience. And
he had this trademark mustache that must have made him look quite distinctive.
Well, you're looking right now at a caricature that he did of himself when he was hired by Collège de Brébeuf to do a contract caricatures of a graduating class.
Oh, that's interesting.
Of students and some professors.
And he did one of himself, but even in photographs, and there's a picture on the other side, he still has that. That
yes,
mustache.
He always had his mustache.
He says, "I did not exhibit at all." I don't know when this was written. Perhaps you can tell me. "I did not exhibit at all for nearly 10 years. I just did not feel that I wanted the world and my art to be face to face." That's an interesting comment for an artist to make. Anybody care to elaborate on that, or does it stand on its own?
It's hard to say, Charles. I don't know on a personal level what you would get from that, but perhaps my feeling is, from what I learned, experiences that he's had working with maybe galleries, maybe the whole business of being an artist.
The business,
I think that perhaps that had a lot to do with it. However, I wouldn't be able to say for sure.
Was he not really comfortable with the marketing aspect of his art? Or did he do it himself, or did somebody do it for him?
No, he tended to rely on galleries. He wasn't marketing. He wasn't self-marketing his work. But I guess his talents lay in his artistic abilities, and I don't think he liked the business side.
Yeah, I get that impression from
Yeah.
what you're saying, what I read about him
Yeah.
here.
And if I could add, I think also when you look at his work, you have a sense that it's almost when you're looking at certain paintings, like opening up someone's private journal, you get the sense that his work is very. It comes from somewhere very personal. I mean, very private, and he's someone who he painted on every day, often several paintings in one day, so it was almost like this need for him. He never got rid of one painting, one drawing that he ever did. It was to him
Well, he was
part of
incredibly
yeah,
prolific. I mean, if you
exactly.
take 1,200 and divide it by the number of years he was actively painting, it's still.
And there's probably even more, like 4,000 works.
Oh, there are others that.
Possibly there, certainly maybe another 1,000
Okay.
in other places.
Some are in people's homes that he did
Oh,
sell.
for sure. I'm getting phone calls from people who say, "Well, we have a Leibovitz painting from we bought one 20 years ago," or we.
Exactly. The 1,200 are the ones that were in his in the storage space where they're kept. But there are certainly many others out there circulating and in people's private collections.
Now, you wrote in notes that were brought to the gallery showing, it says, although Leibovitz was highly regarded amongst his peers and critics, as a result of his extremely private and stubborn nature, he refused to publicly show his works for most of the 50s and again in the 70s. That's a pretty strong part of his own private life to be mentioned. Is that something we should go into more? I mean, was it just that he had gotten tired of the whole art field, or?
Well, part of his existence and his experience as an artist was the isolation that he needed to produce. I mean, I wanted to say earlier that the paintings really were his children.
Was he a very gregarious guy? Was he fun at parties?
I think my father was capable of a variety of emotions. That he had an amazing wit and humor.
Ah, so he would be fun at parties.
Could be, but he also had a need for solitude.
So, well, artists
and
usually have that, yeah.
privacy, and so he had a capacity to paint and to express emotions.
And also, if I can add, I think part of this also need for solitude in painting, he went out a lot into nature. A large part of the connection is landscape paintings. That is the majority of what is in the collection at this time. And he would go out and paint en plein air, out in the open space, as what he thought.
In Montreal.
In Montreal, in the Laurentians, surrounding areas in Montreal, certainly Quebec scenery. And so I think this time with himself and nature was also a big part of what his art meant to him, and also his way of life.
He was alone. Nobody came along while he worked. That wouldn't have been part of it. Did you ever watch him paint? You must have. You lived in the house.
Well, not really. No, actually, it's a very good question. No, I didn't watch my father paint because he painted in his studio. It was only in the 90s when he physically could no longer go outside and go upstairs that a decision was made to create the studio in his living room.
Okay.
And that's when he continued painting for the last 5 to 7 years.
So he was right out there in the middle of the house.
In the living room, in the front of the house, was the studio. The latter stages, a couple of years of his life before his death.
Were you or any of your siblings influenced by his work to the point that any of you are artists?
I think all three of us are artistic. All three
Do you
of us.
paint?
I've taken an art class, but I'm not an artist professionally. But my sister has had experience in theater, and she's a published poet.
So I can see the connection. I mean, art is a wide term.
Well, if I may add that my mother was an artist, and then she became a social worker.
Oh, that's right.
And I've often felt that actually the two careers are interrelated because they both deal with emotions, except one is on canvas.
I'm thinking about the show that I saw when it opened, and because we're doing this in a couple of places for a Jewish radio program, What are his paintings that you would describe that are up there that have a very strong Jewish content?
At the current exhibition?
The current exhibition at the
Well,
Galerie
I would say
d'Outre-Tombe.
the narratives.
Mm-hmm.
There's a picture depicting street life in an Eastern European shtetl town
Yes, that's right.
with a donkey and a farmer, and it's a sort of a blue-gray painting.
Is that the one that I thought was Chagallesque?
Yes, perhaps, yes. And then there's Hebrew letter, the letter Sheen. He did a
yes,
series of about
that's right.
26 Hebrew letters that I eventually would like to contact either some synagogues or Jewish schools if they're interested in seeing this work. There's another painting of a boy or a man with a bird in a yellow light.
Oh, yes.
That sort of has...
And there's this one that we're looking at here that's on the invitation. I don't know if that's exactly a Jewish scene, but it's in a neighborhood that used to be Jewish.
That's
one
correct.
time.
Well, the Plateau was a very Jewish neighborhood from the 1900s till about the 1960s.
Did he mix much with non-Jewish artists? There's a very strong tradition of French art.
Yes, my father was very aware of the and comfortable with non-Jewish communities, Quebecois, and he loved other ethnic groups. He did not like to be labeled or stereotyped.
So if I were interviewing him today, he would not have liked me to call him a Jewish artist.
No, I think he would have preferred you to describe them as a Montreal,
Oh, that's interesting.
perhaps / Jewish artist,
Okay.
but certainly, a Canadian artist. That's really what he was.
Okay, so we'll do that.
And who happened to be Jewish.
In the exhibit, you have a video machine at one corner which has an interview with him.
Yeah.
Perhaps you might want to just elaborate a bit on the source of that interview.
Okay, my father was interviewed by Chaim Montreal in February the 1st, 1980.
Lisa Winston, I guess.
Lisa Winston, who was the interviewer. She's the daughter of Milton Winston.
That's right.
The show, unfortunately, is no longer being recorded.
Well, some other people have taken it over in a way.
Okay. And was, I think, a very well done interview of about 17 minutes where my father talks about his career. And I felt it was fitting to have it
Yeah, very good
at
idea.
the exhibition. I do also want to let the public know that there is a website now.
Oh, yes, and a very good one, I see.
Thank you. And we, so that...
You did it?
Well, I helped
helped involve,
organize it.
What's the web
It's
page?
it's www.normanleibovich.com.
What will people find when they go to the website?
They'll see basically a press release, biography,
Any of his work is
and
there?
and the majority of his work is on the archives.
Very good.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we have under the painting section you'll see 20 paintings in 6 different themes, and then if you want to
lovely.
see more, you'll go under archives.
That's a virtual art gallery.
Well, the family felt that we want to share the paintings with
Wise
the
decision.
public, and people can see them more easily and enjoy them. And
Now, again, we're going to mention where, for the people who are listening
Mm-hmm.
to us, as this still is on. It's at the Galerie d'Art d'Outremont,
Yes.
41 Saint-Just Avenue, and you reach it by taking Bernard west to Wiseman and down one block.
it's 2 blocks south of the intersection Wiseman and Bernard.
All right.
So if certainly easy by car or by subway. There's the Uchima subway, which is close by.
Yeah, there's a Van Horn exit somewhere on the
on Stewart,
on Stewart and Van Horn.
and Van Horn, or Uchima and Van Horn.
Yeah, just a block or two away.
Certainly.
And again, it's Tuesday to Thursday, 1 to 6, Friday, 1 to 5.
That's right. And may I add that
Please.
there will be another exhibition
Yeah,
at
that's what I want to get in while we
Sure.
still have a minute left.
Gallery Harwood in Hudson from September the 18th for about 6 weeks. The opening will be
good.
September the 18th, and the theme will be nudes. It'll be a group exhibition with about 2 other artists.
How many of his works will be exhibited?
I think about 7.
Okay. Now, it may be a little more difficult to describe how to get to the Gallery Harwood, or is it?
Well, if you're driving, basically Harwood is you just take 40 west to exit Hudson, and then look for Harwood.
Harwood, and then it's along there. Yeah.
Yes,
It's actually becoming quite a nice little gallery there.
that's right.
Well, thanks very much for joining us. We have about 15 seconds. If there's anything else we should add.
I just wanted to add that I wanted to thank Malka Sussman for coordinating the collection, and Aaron Black and Darren Stolo for doing the website. And thank you
Great.
for asking
Well,
us.
thank
today.
both of you
Thank
to
you very
come.
much for having us.
Yeah, and again, a very fine exhibit and an important part of Montreal.
I want to thank Gallery d'Art du Tremont. Thank you.
Great. Okay, and we're just about out of time.